I used to think the patience gap between French children and my own was simply temperament. A personality trait, maybe, or something absorbed through proximity to centuries of refined waiting culture, passed down alongside slow Sunday lunches, and the particular French appreciation for the pause between things. I would see a small child standing in a Paris boulangerie, really standing still and quiet, while her mother exchanged unhurried pleasantries with the baker, and I would feel the particular pang of a parent who knows exactly how many seconds she has before it all falls apart. My own 4-year-old on a generous day lasted maybe 40 seconds before the first urgent tugging at my sleeve. On less generous days, we never made it through the door. Then a Parisian friend said something that stopped me cold. Her daughter, perhaps 3.5, was beginning to dissolve over a piece of bread she could see on the counter but could not yet have. She was building, the way small children build, first the lip, then the sound, then the full escalation. And my friend simply looked at her, not sternly, not with a lecture assembling in her expression. She looked at her daughter calmly, the way you might look at rain through a window, and said one word, attendre. Just wait, not in just a moment, or we talked about this, or the long spiral of bargaining I recognized in myself. Just attendre, and the child after a breath steadied, genuinely, visibly steadied. I assumed it was this particular child, not mine. What I did not understand yet, and it took months of reading French developmental research to piece together, is that attendre is not a word a French parent reaches for in desperation. It is a practice, a quiet neural architecture woven into ordinary life from the first year onward. Researchers at INSERM, France's National Health Research Institute, have been studying the outcomes of this habit for decades. By the end of this, you will understand the mechanism behind it, why a simple 90-second pause before responding to a child's request is more powerful than any reward chart, and how 3 ordinary moments a day can quietly change what your child's nervous system learns to do with frustration. Let me start with the word itself, because French carries something here that English does not. Attendre shares its etymological root with the Latin attendere, to pay attention, to turn toward, to be present to something. When a French parent says attendre, the embedded meaning is not suffer until it is over. It is closer to be here with this moment. The pause is not a corridor to cross. It has a texture, a quality of attending that the English word wait does not contain. And children absorb this framing long before they can articulate it, long before they understand the word conceptually, in the way they absorb the emotional register of a parent's voice. I spent some time with this detail because it kept nagging at me in a productive way. In English, waiting is a space between things, an absence, something to be gotten through. Attendre carries attending inside it, the same root as attention, as being present, as turning toward. To wait for something in French is already to be oriented toward it with a kind of trust. When you are trying to build a nervous system that can sit with delay, that is not a small distinction. And here is where the neuroscience becomes concrete. When a young child is made to wait, 2 different neural events can unfold depending almost entirely on the emotional tone of the adult in the room. If the delay is framed as deprivation, no, not yet, you have asked 3 times now, stop, the amygdala reads it as a mild threat. Cortisol briefly rises. The child experiences the wait as stress. Over hundreds of repetitions, the association between waiting and discomfort is reinforced at a neural level. You have not built patience. You have built a conditioned response linking delay with something that feels like danger. When the delay is framed as presence, attendre, said warmly, by an adult who is right there and not going anywhere, the prefrontal cortex activates instead. The child is not being excluded from something. She is being invited to hold a state. And holding a state, practiced consistently and with a calm companion, becomes the neural infrastructure of self-regulation. What struck me most in the INSERM longitudinal data, and this is the finding I kept returning to across different studies, was not the executive function scores. I had anticipated those. What surprised me was the anxiety data. Children raised with consistent micro-weights showed lower baseline anxiety than children raised with either permissive immediate responsiveness or strict punishment-based approaches to delay. The researchers had expected to find patience. They found something more interesting. The practice was calming. Not the waiting itself, but the presence of a regulated adult who treated the waiting as completely unremarkable. The hardest part of introducing this practice, if you were not raised inside this culture, is the first 2 to 3 weeks. A toddler who has always received an immediate response will escalate when attendre first appears. She will cry louder, pull harder, work harder to get the response she has always gotten. And every loving instinct, built into us over millennia for very good reasons, says to intervene, to offer the thing. I know mine did every single time. But French parents, operating from a cultural framework their research now supports, understand that the moment of escalation is not a signal to back down. It is the moment the neural work is actually happening. The child is practicing holding a state she has never held before. The difficulty is the practice. And this is where the research takes a turn that most parenting discussions never quite reach. There is a concept called le cadre that makes attendre possible in the first place. And it is the piece that most English language descriptions of French parenting leave out entirely. Le cadre means the frame, the structure. French parenting philosophy sits on a model that English language observers often misread as either permissive or strict, because it contains elements of both without being either. The actual structure is this: genuine, wide freedom inside a clear, calm, non-negotiable container. Children choose how to play, what to draw, what to talk about at the table. But when the family eats, everyone eats together, and no one starts until the meal is ready. When attendre is said, it is said once. The child does not receive a negotiation. She encounters a boundary, warm, unhurried, and stable. The importance of le cadre to attendre is structural, not cosmetic. A child cannot develop the neural circuitry of self-regulation in an environment that negotiates its own rules. If attendre is sometimes followed by immediate caving, the snack appears, the screen comes out, the parent backs down after the third escalation because they are tired or in a public place. The child's brain registers that waiting is a game, with variable outcomes. The prefrontal cortex is deeply attuned to environmental consistency. It will not invest in building an internal regulation circuit when the external environment keeps changing its mind. The consistency is the prerequisite, not the reward. French parents I spoke to described something that genuinely surprised me. They almost never explain attendre in the moment. They do not say, "We are waiting because dinner will be ready in 5 minutes and it is important to practice patience and think of the baker who worked hard this morning." They say attendre once, and then they go back to whatever they were doing. The calm is the lesson. The explanation is absent because the explanation is not the point. The nervous system does not learn self-regulation through verbal understanding. It learns through experiencing a regulated adult who treats delay as simply part of how the world works. Research from Paris Descartes University found that children aged 2 to 5 who received brief, consistent, unexplained waiting cues from a calm adult developed measurably faster executive function than children who received either no waiting cues or waiting cues accompanied by extensive verbal scaffolding. The scaffolding taught children to wait for the explanation, for the external cue that the pause was justified. The calm word repeated plainly over time taught children to wait for the thing itself. What this tells us about the direction Western parenting culture has moved is uncomfortable to sit with for long. We have become extraordinarily good at explaining patience to children who cannot yet hold the concept abstractly. We build visual timers with countdown displays, reward charts, first then language, sticker systems for good waiting. None of these tools are harmful. They work for their specific short-term goals, but they are all externalized scaffolding. They teach the child to wait for the system to tell them they have succeeded. Attendre bets, quietly and without celebration, on the child's own nervous system to do the work. And the data suggests that bet consistently pays off. The 90-second pause is the piece that changed how I actually parent, more than anything else I found in this research. French parents commonly practice what developmental psychologists call la pause, a deliberate, practiced beat before responding to a child's expressed need or distress. It is not a long pause, 90 seconds at most, often much less. The parent hears the request, makes brief eye contact. The child sees that she has been heard, and then does not immediately act. Both of them wait together. 90 seconds is, approximately, the time it takes for an initial emotional wave to crest and begin naturally subsiding in a young child's nervous system. Research from the University of California, Berkeley tracked toddler cortisol levels and behavioral responses during caregiver interactions in real time. They found that children allowed to sit with frustration for 60 to 90 seconds in the presence of a calm and attentive caregiver showed measurable self-soothing behaviors emerging by the end of that window. Small rhythmic movements, a redirection of gaze, a gradual shift in vocalization from distress towards something more exploratory. These behaviors were largely absent when the caregiver intervened at the 15-second mark. 15 seconds. That is the average intervention window the researchers observed in most non-French families studied. Most of us are moving in at 15 seconds, sometimes 10. The 90-second window when the child's nervous system does its most important regulatory work simply never gets reached. The French instinct, cultivated across generations and now supported by mechanism-level data, is to let those 90 seconds happen. Not coldly, not as a punishment. The adult is present, visible, unhurried. But they wait alongside the child. And in doing so, they demonstrate attendre as powerfully as any instruction ever could. Here is the take that will probably draw some pushback. Most Western patience-building tools, visual timers, reward stickers, enthusiastic praise for good waiting, may actually be making internal regulation harder to develop, not easier. Not because they are harmful, but because they all require an external cue to end the waiting. The child learns, I wait until the system tells me I am done. That is a trainable behavior. It is not self-regulation. Self-regulation is knowing from the inside that the feeling will pass. French children are not taught that waiting earns a reward. They are taught through repetition that waiting is a thing that ends, on its own, naturally without ceremony. Children raised with consistent microwaits, research suggests as few as 3 meaningful attendre moments per day, sustained across the early years, is sufficient, significantly higher on executive function assessments by age 6. One INSERM study measured an 18 to 22% raised with this practice and a matched comparison group. Executive function at age 6 is one of the strongest predictors of academic performance, emotional regulation, and relationship quality through adolescence and into adulthood. There is something I want to ask you genuinely, and I hope you will sit with it honestly. When your child last asked you for something, and you were in the middle of something else, how long did you actually wait before responding? Not what you aspire to, what actually happened in real time. I am asking because when I first paid close attention to my own number, it was much shorter than I thought. There is something useful, not shameful, just useful, in knowing exactly where you are starting from. One detail from the research that has stayed with me: French parents almost never praise a child for waiting well. The "you were so patient, I am so proud of you" response is largely absent from the culture. Because in the framework that Le Cadre builds, attendre is not an achievement. It is not exceptional. It is simply how people are together. The moment you praise it, you mark it as unusual, and you teach the child that waiting is hard, that she does not normally manage it, that it requires celebration when it occurs. The child who hears "well done for waiting" learns, "this was difficult, I need recognition for it." The child who hears nothing learns, "this is what we do," the way we sit at the table or say good morning at the door. The 3 moments French parents most consistently use attendre, according to interviews gathered by developmental psychologist Michel Tournier, are waiting to eat when food is visible but the meal has not officially begun, waiting in public spaces and queues without a device to fill the silence, and waiting for a response to a request that the parent has clearly heard but has not yet chosen to answer. 3 moments. That is the complete practice as researchers have been able to measure it. Not dozens of corrections across the day. Not a restructured schedule or a new parenting philosophy to internalize. 3 quiet uses of a single word, repeated calmly over months and years, until the word itself becomes a gentle anchor, something that steadies both parent and child in the moment before the moment resolves. I want to be honest that when I first encountered this research, I was skeptical. I am suspicious by nature of ideas that sound like they should be embroidered on linen, but the data on attendre is not inspirational. It is mechanical. It describes a learning process in the prefrontal cortex that builds exactly the way any complex skill builds, through small, repeated practice at the edge of what is currently comfortable, in the presence of a calm and consistent guide. There is something worth sitting with in the French language itself. The word for to wait and the word for to expect are the same word, attendre. To wait for something is already to expect it, to be turned toward it with trust. What French parents are teaching, through 3 moments a day and 1 calm word, is not the ability to endure delay. It is something quieter, a trust that the moment will resolve, that the feeling will pass, that there is no emergency here. Start tonight with 1 moment. Not 3, just 1. Say attendre once quietly, and then wait alongside your child, right there with her, not from across the room. See what 90 seconds actually feels like when you are not rushing to fill it. That is the entire practice in its smallest possible form. Will you try 1 attendre moment tonight, or does it feel too different from how things usually run in your house? I genuinely want to know. Drop a word in the comments. If you want to see how Le Cadre works in bedtime routines, which is one of the highest stakes arenas for this practice, there is a video on exactly that, and it builds directly on everything you have just learned here. And if this was worth something to you, sharing it with one other parent is all it takes.